everybody. Today we're going to do a little warm-up because we haven't done a proper video in a while. Need to make something, and I wanted to do something simple. Announcements later, later in this video, but later in general. There's some fun hit camp stuff we can talk about, but today, I'm just going to warm up with some sketches, as you all should be doing. And today, I do a lot of action pose stuff, so today we're going to go over some props. I might actually go in and find like some firearm reference, but a lot of people I feel like are into the fancy stuff. So we're gonna start by redlining a few classics that I think people have problems with for different reasons, and yeah, we'll go over some of those. First one, we'll start relatively as far as visual natures go. We'll start with this longsword here. So we're gonna do a little redline on it real quick, because like anything, you can draw it better the more you understand the basic shapes. And the longsword is going to be made up of a handle, which it's a longsword. It is a 1 to 2-handed weapon. A 1 to 2-handed weapon. Actually, maybe I'll go over and grab it in a minute. Mine's like a hand and a halfer. But, so you want space relative to your character's hands. You know, if you have this sizing for the handle, you're gonna have that could work. There are some long swords like that. So understand how you want your characters to be using it, or how it is meant to be used if you're drawing a real historical weapon or something inspired by that. Your hand guards can be a lot of different designs, but basically it's gonna be across there. You will normally have your pommel of some kind. It can be a circle, it can be this little piece, it can be a gem. But yeah, if we're looking at the basics, and this is where I think it can get a little tricky for some people. So if we're looking at our grid, it starts here. It clearly tapers at a certain point. So if we draw our straight line down, or relatively straight lines down, you can see what we have going here. And this is where I think people start to have an issue. Because if you're just drawing, if you're doing storyboard stuff, like what I do a lot, obviously, you're probably going to start with these simple shapes, and you're just going to draw a box. And that is a great way to get your choreography down. Do not get overcomplicated with everything. If you want to start understanding it, you want to identify where the meat of the blade is going to start to taper out. And that's going to get you that kind of classic, more elegant look. And theoretically, you'll find your center line, and your blade will just taper out, and two sides will intersect there. If we subtract some of the other sketching, we should have what looks like a longsword pretty quickly. Now, again, if you're an animator, cartoonist, comic artist, storyboard artist, you may be thinking, well, that's all well and dandy. How often am I going to be drawing a longsword just from that angle? And you're right. However, one of the things that makes props and things like this kind of unique is that a lot of them have a side. It's like a hand. I have to think about where the camera is. You think of a hand, and it looks like a hand from these two angles. If I shift this way, and I'm drawing it, well, all of a sudden, it doesn't contain the same fundamental shape that makes it read as a hand anymore. If I grab a sword, most of the swords on this rack, actually, and these are all practice weapons. I would not be being willy-nilly with real weapons, but a sword will have a pretty, I don't know how well you can see it with the lighting here, a pretty distinct shape from one angle. As soon as it's pointing at you, dead on, it doesn't have the same identifiable natures. And now you shift it and you start to get that shape more. So a lot of your dynamic drawing of a sword, you're going to want to think about that classic shape it has. Think about how the cross guard goes and everything, because this is messy. It's good to know how to draw, so we'll go over that a little bit, but a good pose like this my sword. If it's behind my back even, I'm overlapping it, but you can see sword behind my back. Come to here, you can see sword. It's going to be the same with most weapons like that. Even, like I was teasing at earlier, firearms and things like that. Oh no. Sword fell down. Firearms and stuff like that will also have a dominant side or angle that is what you're going to be envisioning. So we want to practice some perspective with this, but it's really crucial to have that classic angle. So turning this into some angles. In the straw, just one of the poses I was doing earlier. Really quick, we'll hash out a stick figure here pretty quickly. And I don't want to talk about how the body, how martial artists work to manipulate the weight and the techniques and all that right now. So we talked about how humans pose quite a bit. Not say that we should stop practicing it, but it's just not what I'm feeling is the most crucial. It's just warming up. So we have this foot forward. So we're going to swing this way. So when you wind up, reverse kind of. So like I said, we'll just take this. We want to think of overlapping and depth and dimension. So let's make this guy right-handed. So this is going to be his backhand. So it's just going to come here. Oof. That's kind of stuffed up there. Then we'll have this arm. And we'll say that his shoulder is coming around this way. And maybe we'll even have that hand kind of open just to sell it all a little bit. Now let's show that cross guard. We can make it a little cartoonish. We can add some big shapes to it. You know, just a little something to show that which way the guy's facing. And then let's say that we want the meat of the blade, how thick it is, to go about this long. And then it tapers out this way. So you can get relative long sword going pretty quickly. Again, really simple shapes. Even if we want, if we want that classic blade facing towards the camera, there's a few cheats. That's kind of what I want to go over here. Not how the geometry really rotates in space, because I feel like there's stuff out there for that. Let's talk about what parts are going to overlap and everything. So you're going to have your cross guard, something like this, right? Maybe you add some depth to it. So you pop it out, right? So we'll erase a little bit of this stuff. Your handle is kind of disappearing into the ether back that way. Your blade is going to be relatively the center of this, and it's going to follow through. There's different geometries of swords. I showed you a more dynamically shaped blade, but most of the time, for it to be structurally sound, you have a clear through line from your handle, to your tip, like a human's line of action. And a lot of times, blades will get big. Things moving towards the camera get bigger, yeah. So it gets bigger to a certain point, and then, depending on the drasticness of how much it's facing the camera, this versus this versus this is going to be how drastic that taper is. So you can make an in perspective box, basically, and then just quickly taper out. And then you can adjust things like, oh, that handle looks a little funky, yada, yada, yada. But I think 9 times out of 10, if you want a really drastic, dynamic, crazy thing, kind of fisheye it a little bit, because no one's stopping you. And you can do things like having the handle kind of taper up towards the blade there. That's a little bit of longsword. Let's look at a little bit of katana. Katana, Asian swords in general, for me, the most difficult thing is this line of action, the curve that katana has. And it's hard because that is the foundation of it. Now, otherwise, if we look at it, it's basically the same thing as our longsword for the most part. You can draw a katana by a series of boxes. Handle will be maybe a little bigger, the same size as the blade, and then you have a little hand guard, which you can, again, exaggerate depending on your style. And then you just get your little taper in there, and you get that nice single edge blade. Now, even this already looks a little awkwardly sized. When you're drawing cartoons, again, I would recommend simplifying it so that it's relatively straight. Even maybe even just copy this, paste this, so that they're in parallel. Bing, bang, boom, and then again, think about your hand sizes. A katana should have most swords that I like to use. I'm gonna have a hand's width between each of my hands. So my hand guard is gonna be about here. And if we look at the katana, we can use kind of the same thing as like when we're drawing characters when you measure with head heights. We can take this and say, okay, how many handles long should my sword be, right? Katana looks like is about 3.5 handles long. Now, did I do that here? I'm measuring with my fingers here. 1, 2, 3. I'm about 3 handles long. So that's a tool you can use. And I think this actually kind of already looks very katana-ish without making sure that there's that drastic curve. And I wish I could give you some good tips on making that curve consistent. Can't really. It's a really difficult trick. All you can do is trace some katanas and try to get it in that one nice stroke. Now, because if you're doing comics, animation, cartoons, fan art even, you should have designed your props, right? So reference those. If you're drawing for a specific show, trace the specific lines of action for those props. Now, with katanas versus longswords, a couple of the key things like I said is that single edge thing. So, again, see, most of it, again, is going to, there's a lot more complexity to it, but think about the main body of the blade and then that tip tapers. And then the katana is going to have longswords have a cross guard, which looks like a cross. Katanas have these subas, which can, I don't want to use the word decorative because cross guards can be very decorative as well, but they're this circular thing. Cross guards are big on this one side for a very strategic purpose. Katanas are smaller overall. The handles of them are, so that you can manipulate the sword with your wrist and do this. You can bring it up here. If I grab my longsword, or my simulation longsword, and I'm using it like a katana, and I bring it back for a overhead strike like I would a Korean or Japanese sword, I come up here. And you can see how easy this is to hit me here. So the longsword has this increased defense thing here, and it makes it a very dynamic shape to draw. Which again, very easy to block all these directions like that. But I can't do the same maneuvers as easily with a katana. There's ways to get around this. I can bring it up here and strike down, but I can't do my straight up and down without making sure that I lift it up a lot higher. Whereas, again, a Japanese Korean sword, I can hold it about here, almost right on my head. So that's something to keep in mind as you're designing your props, is what kind of maneuvers do these people want to do. If they want to whip it around like a katana, look at what makes katana move like a katana. You might need this smaller handguard. And one of the things that is nice about this too is that it hides a lot of hands. I know some of us don't like drawing hands. So, take advantage of that. If you're having a character looking at camera and they're holding a katana, this is also really hard for me because I actually use, like, some of my martial art is Korean sword. We call them jingums, mokums, yukaktos, all this other stuff. So, but they look a lot like katanas, I have to admit. So it's easier just to talk about that than nerd out on what I practice. But it feels almost like cheating to talk about the other one. So let's have this guy. He's gonna tuck his arms kind of to the side a little bit, right? But again, we're gonna work smarter, not harder. So we're gonna have the blade come up and just kind of shade in some of that going back there, and you can use that handguard just to hide the hands. And you can do the same thing with the longsword. Just remember, it's a crossguard, so it has to go longer one way. So if you're gonna make a meaty crossguard that covers up hands, you have to really extend the length that way. Now, again, if you're trying to draw somebody winding up, we can take our character head on and have our arms here. And theoretically, a good strike is going to be almost perfectly here. That's not very dynamic or readable, though. Again, we're missing the signature angle of the katana. So even though when I'm practicing martial arts, if I'm looking at camera, I'm coming up here, so you wouldn't see much of the blade behind it. You'd see a little bit of handguard and a little bit of this. It's going to be real awkward. It's not going to be a dynamic silhouette. And then here, same thing. If my blade is pointing towards camera, you're missing a lot of that shape. So what I would recommend is very quickly. What do you mean there is no object to transform? What do you mean? Oh, I'm probably on the. That's my problem, on the wrong layer. Crap. Dang it. Okay, so. Similar thing. We're gonna have a character here. The arms are gonna be coming up to here. Right-handed. Say this and this. So just pop the sword out a little bit, and we can follow that kind of fish-eyed warped curve. And I wouldn't worry too much about the handguards, probably covered up by our guy here. But just kind of, again, look at our general width of the handle, and then just let it taper out. And now we have, it reads that, the guy is holding stick. I think these weapons and things for sketching, getting your layouts down, don't gotta be that hard. I'm gonna folder all this stuff. I think only one layer actually has anything drawn on it, though. Katana style. Ho ho ho. Now, if we're looking at something like a pole arm, or weapons that are more complicated. This is a thumbnail from I believe his name is Scholagrum, his YouTube channel. I think it's easy to be intimidated by something like this. But there's not much reason to be. Again, trace some reference, figure some things out. One of the fun things about this is that there's actually a lot of depth you can get out of this. So we have this hammer side back here, pretty much completely overlapped by the pole. And then this axe shape, which you can have a lot of fun when you're designing these, came up with some really fun shapes. And you can talk about the applications of them all and go into this and that, and that's worthwhile, but like, it's gonna be hard to beat just the a really fun shape. Again, there's this spike that's sticking out. You could make this spike go really crazy. I could see someone exaggerating it out here so that, again, it overlaps the entire handle, and then there'd be another one coming out here. So we can really accentuate this really fast. You could make that hammer side bigger. But I think actually I'm going to make it smaller. So you have that. Maybe you want to add some belly to the blade to make it look just more menacing. If we move this over here, you're supposed to be gone. There's a lot to this already, and I made just a couple little alterations. So you'd have your metal bracey bits coming down here. Oh, I mean, look at that. That is just so much fun. We can make this spike up there sooner. Yeah, there's just so much fun. Pole arms really can be one of the most fun things, I think. But again, if we look at it, so we don't even really need to see the actual side profile of that from what we've already done. So stick, make it as short or long as it needs to be. Let me give myself a little bit more room here. Whoop. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thin these lines out just a little bit because they just look a little, yeah. So, basicness, make these parallel. One thing that's going to mess you up real fast is if you have a line going straight down and then this weird curvy line, because that promotes a vibe, and if that's not the vibe you're going for, you have a problem, obviously. But let's just turn this around using a little bit of our logic. So we know this stick is going to mostly continue. So if we have a hammer side on one side, and the hammer has to be somewhat structurally sound, so boom, we have that. And then we're going to have this blade edge here. Hammer is bigger than the blade, so the blade will probably just come out a little thinner than that. And from the looks of it, it's going to open up and then curve down pretty quickly. So we have that mass of the blade. You can start measuring things. Use some of that 3D brain of yours. The real one had a pretty straight edge there, but we customized it to have that more belly there, and then we let it go straighter. Whoop. So you have that. You have spiky, which again, and this is one of the things that can make pole arms really fun, is that if you start adding more to them, there's something that's really easy to have a dynamic shape from almost every direction you can look at it. Now let's go ahead and we'll add a little bit here. We'll say that the spike has kind of tapers out from here. And then that's another thing. Think about geometry and basic shapes, not just for clarity, but for something that makes sense and feels like it would support itself and can take that damage and impact. But right from there, we were able to kind of extrapolate what that is turned around. Again, that's your main thing. If you try and figure out weapons and draw them in perspective, especially, yes, do it, rotate them, but get that primary angle down, and then you can very quickly start playing with the shapes. And again, one of the fun things with pole arms is that they can be really it's a very good anime weapon in how it can, just be so much bigger. If we try and maybe do like this fun glaive design, does something like that, carve out your little point. Maybe there's a cross on that point or that cross section there. And your dude is just sitting here like, I got a big old weapon, man. And we can try to rationalize why there's that big weapon, but at the end of the day, that's just the kind of fun nonsense a lot of us got into art and fantasy and sci-fi for. But yeah, I hope you see how you can really easily use these to do your gesture drawing almost with, just like you would with photos of, real people, human anatomy. Weapon anatomy is something kind of worth studying too. After you get human anatomy down, Don't go too crazy with one before you've got a grip on the other. But whether you think you're ready for it or you just need to break up the monotony and you're tired of drawing dancers and humans and people on the train every day, you know, have your people hold the weapons because your characters are very important. But these props are important too. And once you get good at drawing these main profiles, then you can start drawing them in angles. Once you start drawing them in angles, you can start combining or put those really cool poses you got used to doing to work with this. And you won't be constrained by, okay, I need it at this angle. I have to draw this. And you can start being like, okay, if I'm just manipulating this, if I take my sword that looks like this, and I want to draw it with my guy here, like chucking it, you can start, rotating it and manipulating it in your mind's eye. It's going to be another good one for me to post and see how everybody responds, because this may be a really helpful sketch and chat that does a lot of you a lot of good. Or everyone's going to look at it and go, what? You crazy, man. Hopefully the first. Hoping to get Ace into videos again here soon. Like I've been saying, it's funny enough, she's still been stuck at doing overtime at work a lot. But this weekend, she went on vacation with her family. She's earned it. She deserves it. Excited to have her back. When she gets back, we want to hit things hard again. So, but for now, hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe, follow, comment for more stuff. We actually do have a list of videos that we want to make based off of some comments, but we want to do them together. We didn't want it to just be me making them, so that's something that will hopefully come soon. Hopefully I'll do minimal editing on this to get it up tomorrow, and we'll see. But keep drawing, keep doing fun stuff, and bye-bye.